Welcome to photosNtravel, a show that introduces you to fascinating places around the world. Please welcome our host and tour guide, Jonathan van Bilsen.
Hello and welcome to this episode of photosNtravel, where we bring the world to your doorstep. In this adventure, we're going to explore the mystical country of Turkiye, formerly pronounced Turkey. Last year, the Turkish government asked the Western world to pronounce the country by its proper name, which is Turkiye. My trip here ranks as one of the most interesting locales I've ever visited. In this episode, we'll travel to Istanbul and head south to the Mediterranean coast. From there, we'll venture inland and visit the fairy chimneys. We'll head to Ankara, the country's capital, before returning to Istanbul for an in-depth visit. We'll begin our adventure right after these messages.
At Voss, your independent grocer, it's all about hometown living and shopping. Owned and operated by Terry and Christine Voss, their newly renovated Port Perry store carries many local items to support our town and its residents.
A fleet of services to help you and your pets live their very best lives. Visit Pet Value in Port Perry and discover a world of expertise, friendly staff, and everything you need for your pets. Pet Value, your pet, your store.
Welcome back. As I mentioned, I flew into Istanbul and met my contact Inci, a Turkish national and extremely knowledgeable guide. I spent 2 weeks on this particular visit and wished I'd stayed longer. Inci had worked with me to plan my trip, and she suggested we first travel west to explore the Sea of Marmara and the fishing village of Gallipoli. This is at the mouth of the Dardanelles Straits. I enjoyed a bite to eat while getting a first glimpse of the European side of Turkiye. I stopped in the town of Gallipoli, which is located on a peninsula of the same name. This area is one of the most strategic locations in the world, as Turkiye is at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. It is a meeting point for Christianity and Islam, communism and democracy, and it acts as a springboard into the Arab world of Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Turkiye gained its independence from the Greeks and the British in 1923 under the leadership of Ataturk. The Ottoman Empire was dissolved, and the country of nearly 85 million people is now struggling to survive in a changing world. 98% of Turkiye is Muslim, and a recent political swing to religion is allowing fundamentalists more freedom, a situation which causes fear among the progressive thinking population. I headed further south and visited the Anzac War Memorial. In 1915, Allied warships tried to force their way through the Dardanelles in an effort to open the supply line to Russia via the Black Sea. They were, however, not prepared for the strength and skill of the Turkish resistance led by Colonel Mustafa Kemal, who later became known as Ataturk. More than 500,000 soldiers lost their lives in this campaign. Anzac troops, which are made up of Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, had extremely high casualties. Dysentery and lack of clean water, which came as a result of the unpreparedness by the British and French campaign, was the main cause of the massive defeat. The area was renamed Gallipoli, and there are various monuments now to commemorate the men and women who died in one of history's fiercest battles. I crossed the Dardanelles Strait and headed for the city of Çanakkale and the continent of Asia. The 45-minute ferry trip is a great opportunity to catch a glimpse of the European shore. The water traffic while I was there was dominated by Russian tankers, most of which have sailed from the Black Sea to the Bosphorus and are about to enter the Aegean Sea. Of course, the war with the Ukraine has changed most of the shipping routes. In Çanakkale, I stayed at the Hotel Akol, located on the picturesque waterfront, where the Dardanelles Straits meets the Aegean Sea. The next day I left Çanakkale and headed south to explore the fabled cities of Troy. At the entrance to the archaeological site stands a gigantic wooden horse, a gesture towards the legendary climax of the Siege of Troy. The story goes that the son of the king of Troy abducted Helen, the wife of a Greek king. The Greeks, being none too happy with this, launched an assault in an effort to bring her back. The war lasted 10 years and was brought to an end when a wooden horse secretly filled with Greek soldiers was presented to the Trojans as a gesture of peace. The Greeks surprised the Trojans and stormed the city, rescuing Helen. Hence the saying, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." There are 9 cities of Troy built over a 5,000-year period. The site was first excavated by German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann. Upon finding a treasure trove of jewels, Schliemann was accused of smuggling the bounty out of Turkiye, hiding them in, of all things, his wife's luggage. Although he denied the accusation, his wife was seen wearing some of the jewelry in Athens. The jewels disappeared but recently surfaced in Russia, and many of them have been returned to Turkiye. In his quest to find as much treasure as possible, Schliemann made such a mess of the site that archaeologists are still undoing the damage he did more than 150 years ago. The Turkish government does not supply funds for excavation, which unfortunately results in little or no restoration to many of the ancient sites. Any unearthing is paid for by foreign investment or private money. I continued south to the city of Bergama and the age-old ruins of Pergamon. This ancient site is one of the most magnificent archaeological venues in Turkiye. When Alexander the Great died, a feud between his generals developed. A considerable fortune had been amassed by one of those generals who, when he was killed in battle, left all the money to care for the preservation of Pergamon. The money was used to expand the city. A library which contained over 200,000 books was built. Because it competed with the library in Alexandria, the largest in the world at the time, the Egyptians stopped their shipments of papyrus to Pergamon in revenge. When the library in Alexandria in Egypt was destroyed by fire in 48 BC, Mark Antony stole the books from Pergamon and presented them to his beloved Cleopatra as a gift. A great gymnasium was also constructed along with a giant altar to Zeus, which is now located in the Berlin Museum. A well-preserved 10,000-seat theater pressed into a hill still remains, as does the ruins of a prestigious hospital which catered to the mental illnesses among the wealthy. The hospital had a 90-meter or 300-foot tunnel, where patients ran or hobbled, depending on their ailments, while priests shouted phrases of encouragement from holes in the roof. I continued my journey south to Izmir, formerly known as Smyrna. Izmir is the third largest city in Turkiye and a major port on the Aegean Sea. During my stay in Izmir, I lodged at the Movenpick Hotel located on the shores of the Aegean. Most of the buildings in Izmir were destroyed by earthquake and fire in 1922. However, a mass reconstruction has once again brought the city back to its former glory. On the outskirts of Izmir is Ephesus, probably the most famous archaeological site in Turkiye. Its fame is in part due to its location on the Aegean Sea and easily accessible by cruise ships, but its historical significance shows that Ephesus is the place where Mary, the mother of Christ, died. Just before Christ was killed in Jerusalem, he told Mary to accompany John the Baptist to Ephesus, where she lived in a small cottage for the remainder of her years. The site was discovered in the 19th century after a German nun who had never set foot in Turkiye had a vision which showed her the exact location of the house where Mary died. My next stop was the museum in Ephesus, where I saw some of Turkiye's most cherished archaeological possessions. Famous throughout history for its Temple of Artemis, one of the ancient seven wonders of the world, this great and sacred city lay in ruins and was largely forgotten until the 20th century. The old city of Ephesus was built on the edge of the Aegean Sea, but over time, silt has formed and the water is now 7 kilometers or 4 miles away from the ruins. There have been numerous discussions about redigging the land and bringing the sea back to its original location. Ephesus was founded in the 13th century BCE and later became the provincial capital of Rome. The city also gained importance as a Christian center when St. Paul preached here to the Ephesians. Although confronted by local merchants, St. Paul wrote his famous epistle, which to this day is still read throughout the world. The paved Arcadian Way, built in 550 CE, was the main street of the city. It was once lined with shops under a covered arcade surrounded by fine columns. This major thoroughfare led all the way to the harbor. The public toilets used by Roman nobility were a meeting place to trade and discuss political problems. In the event of a cool day, the Romans would send in their slaves to warm up the cold marble seats. Walking along the sacred way, I arrived at the celebrated Celsus Library, complete with columned porticos and detailed decorations. Opposite the library, Ceres Street leads uphill. Along it are the Roman baths built in 200 CE, which include a dining hall and a dormitory. The area was rebuilt in the 4th century by a Christian lady and included a brothel, which had an underground passage leading to, of all things, the library. The Temple of Hadrian is now little more than a facade, but it certainly gives an indication of how grand things once were. This is the Hellenistic Theater, which was renovated in the 1990s to accommodate more people during festivals held in May of each year. I found strolling through Ephesus was like taking a journey back in time. I left Ephesus and headed inland and was amazed by the picturesque countryside. My next stop was Pamukkale, or Cotton Castle as the area is known. Pamukkale is a freak of nature, a constant fall of thermal spring water which petrifies as it cascades down the hill with tiers of apparent ice of snow overhanging the brooding plateau below. The area deceives the eye, for the snow is actually salt, which has hardened it to rock formation. Thermal springs cascade over the area, making this one of Turkiye's most popular resort areas. Unfortunately, along with commercialization comes destruction, and as the hotels reroute the thermal springs for their own use, they return a filthier version of what they received, which is slowly beginning to discolor the white surface. The area is a popular spot for tourists and health fanatics to leisurely frolic in the hot springs. Trekking through western Turkey, or Turkiye as it's now known, is an amazing adventure. The sadness of visiting Gallipoli and learning about the terrible events in World War I was sorrowful, but educational Ephesus, on the other hand, was an amazing trip back in time. Seeing the thermal springs of Pamukkale was intriguing, and I wondered about visiting a Turkish bath. We'll be back right after these messages.
Not all Canadians have the time nor desire to manage their finances, and often that responsibility is up to financial professionals. Our goal is to help Canadian families achieve a happy and successful financial future. Visit us, the McClellan Financial Group of Asante Capital Management.
PP Print is excited to offer Port Perry wearables, featuring 2 great designs. Show your Skoogog pride with apparel and headwear. We have you covered. PP Print, more than just print.
Welcome back. In this segment, we're going to see the center of the country, including Cappadocia and the fairy chimneys, as well as a visit to Ankara, the country's capital. First, however, I wanted to stop at Hierapolis, made famous by its Turkish baths. The ancient site of Hierapolis was founded in 190 BCE by King Pergamon. It became famous because of its thermal baths, which had healing properties for curing heart disease, rheumatism, and nervous disorders, or at least so it was thought. It was therefore named Hierapolis, which means sacred city. For me, it was an opportunity to experience a real Turkish bath. Enough said. This city was famous for its sanctuary of Pluto and the plutonium still found there. Poisonous plutonium gases escaped from underground caves, lending the name Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, to the area. Eunuch priests were alleged to be the only mortals who could enter the cave and come out alive. Stories of golden treasures buried deep within the caves began to grow, and many adventurers lost their lives due to the poisonous gas. Men would send animals such as bulls into the netherworld only to have them die instantaneously. The priests were only able to enter for a few minutes and exit alive, but not without holding their breath. The gases are still there, and visitors are forbidden from nearing the cave. My adventure continued to Denlizi for an interesting session on carpet making, one of Turkiye's most popular exports. The carpets manufactured here are made of wool, cotton, and silk. The family which owns this factory has been making carpets for 300 years and is one of the major producers in the country. Silk is extruded from cocoons using hot water and then carefully spun into thread. Using flower and plant dyes, the threads are colored and then woven into some of the finest carpets in the world. As we continued toward the Mediterranean, Inchi stopped at beautiful Salda Lake, a picturesque area known for camping and picnicking. I had a fantastic opportunity to visit with a modern-day nomad family. The Turks were originally nomadic tribesmen who descended from Mongolians and made their way into this region in the 10th century. Modern nomads travel with the seasons, tending sheep or picking cotton. Nomadic life can be viewed as relatively easy and free of responsibilities and involving little hard work. The prospect of settling down to an agricultural life therefore seems like a prison sentence to the gypsy existence they now enjoy. At last we reached the Mediterranean Sea and the picturesque village of Antalya. From my hotel, I had a beautiful view of the clear blue waters. Antalya has invested a great deal of money in its development as the premier resort of the South Coast, completely renovating its old harbor to turn it into a new yachting marina with classy hotels. Antalya is the main port on the southern coast of Turkey and has been for 2,000 years. The town is set on a natural harbor, where U.S. Navy ships can often be seen. For photographers, the city is a gold mine, and for shoppers, it's a paradise with numerous boutiques around every corner. Antalya is filled with history, and many artifacts can be seen at the museum. "30 minutes outside Antalya is the ancient city of Aspendos. The old theater located here is by far the finest example of a Roman theater anywhere in the world. It was built in the 2nd century CE and it's still nearly intact. The theater holds an audience of 20,000 people, and the acoustics are as remarkable now as they were in the olden days. I continued on to Pergay and another ancient site. Built on a fertile plain, the extensive ruins indicate the size of this once famous city. Colonized by the Greeks after the fall of Troy, this city was a bustling metropolis. Local vendors can be found at every turn selling homemade crafts to eager tourists. A 4-meter or 12-foot wide river once flowed through the center of the main street, bringing freshness on a summer's day to the people who shopped at galleries alongside of the thoroughfare, which was supported by marble columns to provide shade. After a final glimpse of the Mediterranean, I head inland to central Anatolia. Inchi stopped en route to view the beautiful Korsunli waterfall, a spectacular sight set in beautiful mountain scenery. My adventure continued through the Taurus Mountains, where the scenery is just spectacular. I stopped to view the Ezri Foglu Mosque, built in 1299. If a mosque has 1 minaret, it means the villagers paid for it. If it has 2, the governor contributed to it. If there are 4 minarets, it means the Sultan donated the money. Konya is the religious center of Turkiye, and upon arrival I had an opportunity to see a reenactment of the famous whirling dervishes. The whirling dervishes were founded by a 13th century poet and philosopher who believed an ecstatic state of universal love could be induced by the practice of whirling around and around and around. This religious rite, complete with conical hats, white robes, and haunting music, was abolished by Ataturk in the 1920s. It seems, in order for participants to fully benefit from the ritual, mind-altering drugs had to be used. Konya has a population of 2.1 million and stands 1,000 meters above sea level. This region is well known around the world for its pottery, and its museum is dedicated to the skillful art practiced here every day. My next stop was the fabled city of Kaymakli in Cappadocia. It's a huge underground city which was a refuge for Christians in the 8th century. They encountered opposition from the Muslims and Shiites who tried to exterminate them. The Christians dug and carved 8 levels of accommodations in the rock. A total of 300 people could live here at any given time, and they quickly built additions to accommodate the rapidly expanding population. The facility was complete with kitchens, toilets, dining rooms, and sleeping quarters. The earth removed from the inside of the caves was used to create false structures, causing confusion among the attackers. The many entrances to the tunnels were closed by an ingenious blocking system. The area is also home to the fairy chimneys made by a now extinct volcano 30 million years ago. Volcanic ash spewed into layers of soft porous rock which over time were eroded by the wind, snow, and rain. These structures were duplicated by the Christians to create their underground city and easily hide the entrances. A little further along lies Gorame, a city which has been occupied since the dawn of history. More recently, it was settled by the Christians who, under threat of attack from the Muslims, moved to this area where geological conditions made it easier to hide. Skilled stone masons had a great opportunity to create spectacular churches underground. As time continued, Muslims defaced the Christian paintings, and only in recent years has the area become protected. Unfortunately, because of the softness of the stone, the buildings are beginning to crumble. Continuing west, I arrived in Ankara, the capital of Turkiye. So complete was Turkiye's defeat at the end of World War I that the spirit of its people might well have been crushed. The Allied division of the Ottoman lands was challenged by the Greeks, who wanted to occupy the entire Aegean coast. Greece landed an invasion in 1919 which pushed deep into the interior, but they came up against Turkish forces under the command of Ataturk. This became known as the War of Independence, and the movement carried across the entire country. A treaty was signed in 1923, creating the present-day country of Turkiye. A new alphabet was developed and Turkiye was brought into the Western world, all because of Ataturk, whose mausoleum is a magnificent sight to visit. The city is very modern with wonderful museums, hotels, markets, and shopping areas. On my way to Istanbul, I stopped at Gordion near Bursa, the burial place of King Midas. The legend of King Midas and everything he touches turning into gold was in fact inspired by a river rich in gold particles that ran through his kingdom. I leave the Bursa area and head for Europe and Istanbul, stopping at the Dolmabahce Palace, built in 1853 as the home of the Sultan. It was designed to make Westerners feel at home as Turkiye began a slow reform into Westernization. The palace boasts the largest chandelier in the world, weighing 4,000 kilograms or 4.5 tons, and was donated by Queen Victoria. Countries from all over the world have offered gifts, which are now housed inside this beautiful palace where one can still feel the presence of the mighty sultans from days gone by. The city of Istanbul has always been a sought-after area because of its natural harbor and accessibility to Asia Minor. First, it was occupied by the Greeks, who named it Constantinople after Constantine. Later, the Crusaders arrived who looted the city, leaving little behind for its inhabitants. In 1450, the Ottomans took control and renamed it Istanbul, meaning the city. It remained the capital until the War of Independence in 1923. The Hagia Sophia was originally built as a church in 537 CE. When the Muslims ruled, they converted it into a mosque. Unfortunately, because it did not face east, it was abandoned and replaced by the Blue Mosque directly across the street. When the Sultan ordered its construction, he had left explicit orders to cover the minarets in gold. In the Turkish language, the word gold and the word six are very similar, and the architect misunderstood, instead building 6 minarets. What a fantastic country Turkiye is, and visiting the numerous cities was quite an experience. For Photos and Travel, I'm Jonathan van Bilsen. It's been my pleasure to be your tour guide today, and I look forward to our next adventure. If you enjoyed this program, please click the subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode.
Want to know what's happening in Skugog? News and lifestyle, changes in business, and all the entertainment information you'll ever need. Plus, each edition has a new Photos and Travel article. Look for your next copy in your mailbox.
As our communities begin the slow road to reopening, there are still issues needing closure. In these crazy times, let us be a roadmap to community events and issues we face together. TheStandardNewspaper.ca, raising the standard in our community.